Welcome to the Property Founder Podcast, where we sit down to have conversations with property entrepreneurs to uncover lessons from their story to help guide you in your business journey.
So we've invested about £280 million in 14 buildings across six different cities.
You know, coming from where we come from, you don't meet many people like yourself. And I remember just like racking my brain thinking, am I sitting with a guy that's got 16 million in his bank account?
What sort of impact do you feel growing up in that environment?
Very freeing. The pressure only came when I was like, okay, I could be at home doing nothing after university. Came back from Wyoming and I was like, I'm going to go into property. This guy rang me and he said, do you want to come and work for me? And I said, yes. And he was like, how much do you want to be paid? And I went high. And he went very low.
You could have actually done this in Hackney, innit?
You from Hackney as well?
Yeah, he's from Hackney.
Are you?
Cool. So let's crack on.
Hi, Ross.
Hello. Hi, Sam. Yeah, thank you for coming down. Appreciate
Pleasure.
it. So I guess a bit of an intro. So who is Sam for those that are watching this for the first time?
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. I grew up originally in London, around Acton, and then moved to Oxford when I was 6. And so I was in Oxford till the end of school. Then went up to Durham University, did an undergraduate degree in combined social sciences, which was like lots of, I don't know. It was sociology, anthropology, history of art,
Politics.
education. So lots of, it was very varied, very like high level on lots of different topics rather than a deep dive on any one topic, which actually turned out to be perfect for me because I was not particularly academic. But yeah, loved growing up in Oxford. My dad is an artist. My mum brought up 4 of us. And he's also a worship leader as well, so like does music for churches,
Okay, very cool.
and has done both the music and been an artist for 50 years.
Did that inspire you to get into music by any chance? Like,
You wouldn't want to hear me play music.
Can you sing?
We've been at church. Next time I'll go loud.
Yeah.
And I love singing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Singing in tune. I'll give a review when I hear it.
Bit of an interesting upbringing, I guess. So from in London to outer London and then off to Durham University. What would you say kind of during that time you're growing up, going through university, were you set on one specific thing? Like, did you know exactly what you wanted to be? Was there aspirations to kind of, get to a certain career or level? Kind of talk us through that and where your mind state was.
No, I had no idea what I was going to do. All my cousins on my dad's side anyway, no one works for anyone. They're all entrepreneurs, mostly kind of artists or in creative industries. And so, yeah, I had no idea. My parents didn't go to university, so us going to university was a bit of a first step and didn't really know what to expect there either. Had a lot of fun, but yeah, left university with no idea what to do. Which was a bit scary, actually. And suddenly you're living back at home, which you want to get out of quite quickly. And yeah, so I remember that was 2005, so the summer of 2005.
Yeah.
And it links actually how I got into property, because I have a cousin who has a cabin in Wyoming, and she was building an extension to that cabin and said, do you want to come out and help build? And so I went out there for a month, I think it was August 2005, and had the most amazing time with this, just helping out. And I remember I was had like a rock kind of like fascia building onto the double car park, which was the base of the cabin. So I spent a month putting pieces of stone onto concrete. Wow. And I loved it. It was the most rewarding thing. And then the evenings we'd go into Jackson, eat burgers, go to rodeo, go fishing, go riding, and it was complete bliss for a month. And then I realized, okay, now it's time to go home. What am I going to do with my life? And I'd had some different thoughts. One of the thoughts was hospitality. So I really liked the idea of maybe restaurants or hotels or something like that. But building out there, I was building with a friend who owned 2 or 3 pubs, and he said, don't do it. It's not the right thing to go into. Yeah. It looks very glamorous and fun to be hosting all your friends in your restaurant or your pub. It's not. He said, if you're the one who's got to be there at 5 a.m. to let the barrels in, and then you've got to be there to cash up at the end of the night. And it's not a good lifestyle. So he put me off that idea.
Sure.
But I'd been building for a month, loved it, and had a tan for the first time in my life because I'd had 4 weeks of sun. Kind of a tan.
Was that the first time out of the country?
No, I'd been out. I'd been
okay.
out before, yeah.
Okay.
But it was. I think it was probably the first. Probably I'd been to America before that, to New York, which was a whole other story. But yeah, first time in certainly in Wyoming.
Okay.
And which is a very different type of America.
Yeah.
Amazing type.
How old were you then, actually? What was...
I would have been 20.
Okay. I'm just thinking, Wyoming for a month after university, right?
Yes.
Okay. What was your parents' view? I guess, obviously, you said they're entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So did they have like a set, you have to do this, or was there
Not at all.
nothing,
No pressure.
nothing strict at all?
No pressure.
Fair.
I think they're really amazing parents because they just wanted us to thrive in the path that we found. And there was no pressure around academics or particular profession or work. And that was an incredible setup for us because we didn't know that we couldn't go and do lots of things. So we hadn't been trained to think that you have to go through this particular path of training to go and set something up for yourself. And so it was quite an entrepreneurial kind of upbringing. I was doing car washing, lawn mowing from the age of, 12 probably.
Wow.
Doing all sorts of like little business things from 10 or 12. Some of which worked, some of which definitely didn't.
What sort of impact do you feel growing up in that environment and what your parents fostered had on you? Like when you look back and you reflect on this?
Very freeing. Very freeing because of that lack of pressure. And so, the pressure only came when I was like, okay, I could be at home doing nothing after university, but that is not going to satisfy. That's not going to be a good life. So I've just got to get out there and do something. And so, that summer found myself in Wyoming, came back from Wyoming and I was like, okay, I loved that building for a month. I'm going to go into property. I want to go into something that's tangible. I'm not going to go and be like a derivatives trader. I didn't even know what that is. It's got to be, something. So not public markets. I knew it wasn't trading or anything like that. It was something tangible. And having ruled out the pubs, restaurants, hotels route, I thought, okay, I'm going to go and do property of some kind. Came back and wrote a load of letters to a load of people. And I was incredibly fortunate. One of those letters, one of my brothers, who are a couple of years older than me, had a contact in property, passed the letter on to that person. That person passed it on to a friend. That friend passed it on to their boss.
No way.
And this guy rang me and said, I've got a letter in front of me. What do you want? And I started saying, he was called Simon Kitching, wonderful, wonderful man. And he said, what do you want? And I was like, oh, I went to school here and I went to university there. He said, I don't care about any of that. What do you want? And I said, a job. And he said, come and see me. I think it was the next day or the next week. And so I went, sat down with him, we chatted for about 45 minutes. And he said, do you want to come and work for me? And I said, yes. And he was like, how much do you want to be paid? And I went high. And he went very low. And we kind of landed somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And so I was very fortunate. He just hired me off the back of that meeting. And the job was, believe it or not, so I'm older than I look. The people weren't sending PDFs around. So property deals going around were not on PDF. And now even PDFs being replaced.
Yeah.
But people were still sending brochures around of commercial properties. So in the post, you get a brochure and it would have a £40 million office building or a £5 million shop or whatever else, or an industrial unit. And so he hired me to scan those brochures into a directory, like a database, and to enter the key information from the brochures into the database. So the investment team the next day could analyze those deals or see the deals in a list, say, oh yeah, we like that city, or we like that city, or we don't want to do that town or whatever. And my nickname was Scanning Monkey. And so after about, I think it was probably 6 months, one of the investment leads came over and was like, well, actually, I think it was Simon came over and said, we're not going to keep you here, are we? And I was like, probably not. You know, there's only, you know, the daily scanning wasn't fulfilling, wasn't as fulfilling as you might think.
Yeah.
So he said, just join the investment team. And then I realized in the investment meetings daily that I'd seen every deal that was going into the system for 6 months. So when a deal came in the City of London, or it came in Manchester, or wherever it was, I was saying, oh, we had another one in about 4 months ago. So we were starting to draw, you know, connections between different deals. And I thought that brought great value. I'm sure the investment team did. But I just got stuck in. So I just copied what they did, which was investment agency at the time. So it's like a state agency, but for commercial property. So those guys were seeing everything that was in the market and then thinking, what clients do we have that might want to buy that office in the City of London? And they'd ring them and say, I've got a great office. So it was kind of broken. And so I just got stuck in and started finding clients, meeting people, being introduced to clients, and trying to do deals. So that's how I got my start. So I was incredibly fortunate to get in that way and to go straight into investment, which for many people is a department maybe of a firm that they'd love to end up in.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize how lucky I was.
Question on the letter that you sent out. So firstly, what was on the letter and who were you sending it to?
I'd have to dig it out. But it basically said, I've recently graduated. I love the idea of property. You're in property. Can I come and meet you? And I think someone at the time had given me the advice to don't go and ask for a job straight up, ask for advice. It's the same with fundraising.
Yeah.
You know, if you're fundraising for your business, it's usually best to go and say to someone, please, can I come and sit down with you for 20 minutes, some advice. And if they love what you're doing, they're going to ask, can I invest? But if you say, can I come and sit down with you for 20 minutes and pitch you for money, it's actually not that appealing. Or it's not as appealing, I don't think. People like to think that they've got advice to give.
Yeah.
Everybody
That's why we're
likes
doing
to
a
be able
podcast.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
Of course.
true,
No.
true. Everybody likes to share the advice and be that person. Going back to that though, I think your time at that firm is very important, even those 6 months, because I guess you didn't lose, 6 months being the scanning monkey. Why didn't you lose motivation and be like, do you know what? I don't want to keep doing this. Was there like an end vision you had of, you know, one day I'm going to be in the room with those guys, or was it just you sticking it out because you had nothing else to do?
I think I was just delighted to have a job. I was just really pleased to have a
Yeah.
job. You know, getting a job is hard. And so I was pleased to have a job. I was pleased to be getting a paycheck, which is just amazing. Having done entrepreneurial things up to that point in like holidays and like summer jobs and that sort of thing, I'd got a taste for it. But then I was like getting a monthly paycheck. And that's amazing. And so, I was not about to throw that away, but I was feeling like data entry was not my passion. And I was pleased to be there, but even more pleased to then go onto that investment team, try and do some deals. And I ended up working with those same people, those same partners for 10 years.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So even though the business changed forms, got bought out by a big publicly listed group, then reformed in a new business, helped grow that business. But ultimately, I was with those same people for 10 years.
Talk me through that though. Is that, because I'm sure I heard you worked for Knight Frank.
No, George, my business partner.
okay.
George was Knight Frank.
Yeah,
Okay.
he's actually properly trained.
I knew it was one of you two. I didn't know who it was though.
Yeah.
Okay. And then also you mentioned you gave the letter to your brother. So
Yeah.
there's 4 of you.
Yes.
Four, okay.
Yeah.
So the other 3, what did they end up doing and what were they doing during this time? I'm assuming you got one older brother and then 2
I
younger.
got 2 older brothers who
Okay.
are twins.
Okay.
Okay.
And they went into, have ended up in investment as well.
Property.
In all sorts, in wealth management,
Got you.
insurance investment, and have built amazing businesses over time. And then my younger sister is very happily married with 4 children.
Nice.
And volunteers in lots of arenas, and is a great musician, singer, and is running an amazing family.
Nice.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I think one thing that's like interesting to see is quite early on, you were just, someone might actually even look at a data entry role at some point as like a dead end job. Like I'm just doing repetitive tasks over and over again. But you had, Simon, you mentioned,
Yes.
that looked at you and said, you know what, you're not going to be here for that long. Let's actually somewhat invest in you by promoting you to do something different or putting you into a different department because they could see some potential in you.
Yes.
So now, like, let's fast forward. So to a point when you was working in that role to a point of, you know, moving into entrepreneurship full time. How did that happen? Like, what was that journey like?
Yeah. So I was, as I said, I was working with those same partners for 10 years.
Yeah.
And again, I was very fortunate. That business got bought out and a couple of the partners reformed a new business. And I think it was around 2008. So it was a very, very turbulent time.
Yeah.
And hired me into that. So I was employee number one. There were three of us sitting in a serviced office in Hanover Square, in Mayfair. And so we went on this journey from being in the midst of the global financial crisis and learning from those two, because we were reading the paper every day and going, like, which bank is going to go down next?
Yeah.
Or, you know, some really turbulent things going on. And so I learned a huge amount just being alongside them. And then went on and we acquired a couple, probably 2 or 3 businesses over time, built a vertically integrated real estate group. And by the time I left at the end of 2014, there was over 200 people in that group.
Wow.
So it was a real pleasure to be a part of something that grew like that, and, you know, bought lots of different types of businesses, aggregated different teams, and just being on that journey with them. So it was like entrepreneurial whilst working for people and whilst getting a paycheck.
Yeah.
What are some of the things you would say you learned through that experience? Because there's obviously you've worked with them for a number of years as well, but I'm sure there's things that you've taken from that time that you're applying today, maybe even subconsciously now because it's been so long. But what would you say were some of the key takeaways from working with them in that environment?
I think they had a great sense of fun, a lot of those partners, which is really important because when you're, you know, going through a rough time in a business, it's good to know how to have fun once in a while as well. And so they're good people, and they knew when actually it was getting tough and everyone just needed to have some fun, even though that's going out to lunch together as a team or whatever it might be. And so yeah, good sense of fun, and that's definitely a takeaway. There were times when we were working incredibly hard on, let's say, structuring a new fund or whatever it was, and it's just hard grind for, in some cases, years. And then you have some wins, but the task is so great you forget to celebrate. And we slipped into that a few times, and that's something we've really tried in the current business that I run to not do, to actually celebrate the wins along the way. Even though, you know, tomorrow the celebration's over and you've still got this mountain to climb, or this, you know, what might look insurmountable. Yeah. But just to enjoy the wins along the way, however small they are.
Yeah, there's this saying that I heard from an episode in Billions is, if you don't celebrate the milestones, you're just passing time.
Yeah.
So it's always important to do that, right? To definitely mark those milestones along the line, because I think we do a good job of it. I don't think we do a good job of doing that sometimes. But
yeah, you probably a bit more, I think.
You reckon?
I think so, because I remember like the 6-figure thing that was big, and that to me just like all right, cool.
Yeah, fair. That's fair. Yeah, fair.
But it was important that you did it, and I think like
what's the 6-figure thing?
Like us crossing, you know,
just 6 figures in turnover and 6-figure business, and then
right.
consistently doing that.
But he pulled me up on that. I didn't. Yeah, I was probably just tunnel vision.
I think it's because I was looking at the numbers. I was just like, oh wow, okay, this is something we've been doing consistently. We've never really marked this. And again, it's you could say it's a vanity metric, but it's still something that where if we look at ourselves, and I'm always really big on searching within your inner child, that dreamer within you would look at the older version of you and think, oh, am I even capable of achieving those things? So when you pass when you hit those milestones, it's definitely something to mark.
100%.
But I guess when you're so busy, you forget to do these things because you're so in the weeds of trying to just get to the next level and the next level and the next level, and you never really mark any particular moment. So it's important to zoom out reflect, acknowledge what's happened, and then, you know, move on.
Definitely.
So yeah, I agree with that.
I've got a question for you. So, with the investment agency, I remember I had no clue what these types of companies did until I got into real estate. So, maybe, you know, for people that have no idea what an investment agency does, was all you said, you know, they find deals for clients, but talk us through what that sort of structure looks like.
Sure.
Because I know, obviously, all of that experience in that commercial world has helped you in what you're doing today with Kinrise.
Yes.
But how does a brokerage make money?
Yeah.
And what does their business model look like?
Yeah. I had no idea what they did, even when I was working there, honestly. And so seriously, because, you know, Simon and Mark and the others were so kind at just throwing me into it, but I didn't know what was going on around me. And so I had a book and I would write all these things down in it, like words I was hearing that were like
Jargon.
yeah. And I just write pages of these words or notes or questions. And then a couple of the people on the team were really kind, and I'd go for a coffee with them, go through one by one. What is this? You know, what's a net initial yield? What's a reversionary yield? What's a hereditament? What's all these ridiculous words? and then you learn it over time. And if you've written it down, got the answer, and then you can flick back to it as well. That's really helpful. So in effect, the commercial real estate market, obviously, most business happens in a commercial premises. And most businesses in a commercial premises don't own that premises. So if you walk around the city of London or Spinningfields, you know, the tenants, the people with the name above the door, typically don't own that building.
Yeah.
That building is owned by a pension fund or a family trust or a foundation or a local entrepreneur. And so there's a whole market of property owners out there, commercial property owners, and lots of different ones. And it's obviously an enormous market. So those property owners will have different risk return profiles. And so they'll be buying and selling properties. So they might buy it when it's leased for 20 years to someone, but by the time that lease gets shorter, they might not want it anymore. They want to sell it to someone else, and someone else who's prepared to buy a property with a shorter lease will buy it. Then that lease will get even shorter, maybe towards the end of the lease, and someone will buy it because they're prepared to do the refurbishment work when that tenant leaves. So there's a whole sort of life cycle of the asset and different buyers for those assets as the life cycle goes through. So in the same way as, I suppose, estate agency in residential property, those buyers, those funds, let's say pension funds, are sitting there, and they're not necessarily going on like Rightmove or Zoopla to find a £40 million office building, although you do occasionally see one, which is quite fun. What's happening there usually is the big property agencies or service firms have investment agents within them, and they are, as I said earlier, they're seeing a property come to the market, like that office building, and they're thinking, I know that pension fund has investment allocation to put out, and they'll send it to them. They'll ring them or they'll send them the PDF. They'll no longer send them the brochure in the post. And so that investment agent will then typically act on behalf of the pension fund in trying to purchase it. So they'll go with them to look around the building. They'll help them line up surveys of the building. They'll negotiate on their behalf with the seller. And the seller will have an agent and the buyer will have an agent, which is a slightly different thing to residential.
Okay.
And so you've got two agents who are trying to do the deal. So the selling agent is retained by the building owner. And then there'll be like 10 agents acting on behalf of 10 different buyers. And so that's the interaction between those 10 agents or more and the selling agent, who will then run a bids process and run the due diligence and make a judgment on who's the most credible buyer, who's going to get to the right number. And so those agents who are acting for the seller or the buyer will charge a fee.
Yeah.
And the fee would typically, on the buy side, would typically be between 0.5% and 1%, depending on the size of the building. Obviously, in very, very large, there's some of these transactions are huge. And then the seller will charge a fee to the owner of the building as well for selling it.
Oh, so they make a fee on the sale.
The selling agent will make a fee from the seller.
Got you.
And then the buying entity, so the pension fund, will pay their agent.
Their agent.
Let's say 1% for helping them buy it.
And is that the transaction finished? Like after it's bought, the pension fund takes over, controls
Yes.
the building. The investment agent doesn't handle managing it or nothing like that.
Not typically. So they will be usually focused on being an investment agent
Got you.
and helping people buy buildings. They will often then introduce, if they're in a large service firm, the property management team, valuation team, other teams that can help handle.
So literally an
property
advisor,
managing.
advisor from A to Z. It's very similar to American market.
Yeah.
I've been watching Selling Sunset.
Yeah.
But it's very similar. Like the buyer has
buyer
an
agent, yeah.
and then the seller has.
Yeah, because I remember when we worked as agents, it wasn't. We used to get approached by buying agents, but it wasn't as common in the residential space. I think it's much more common in the commercial space. In some way, it feels like commercial at a certain level is like business in the shadows. You know what I mean?
I feel like it's kind of like the financial markets. It reminds me like very similar to the financial markets in terms that, again, there's a word that you just said, hereditary. Hereditament. I was like, I've never heard that word before. But there was a point when I'd never heard derivatives.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm just like, it kind of works in the same way where it's behind closed doors. If you know, you know.
Yes.
And if you don't, like, you know, a normal residential homeowner would have no idea
What's going
on behind the scenes.
That's something that deeply frustrates me about business is the lingo, and a lot of which is unnecessary.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the lingo is for people within that industry to feel kind of smart. So if you're a newcomer into it, suddenly you're it takes a lot to get in the room, to like really get in the room. And I think it's completely unnecessary.
Yeah. I liked what you mentioned, is that when you first started and you were, writing down words you didn't understand and you were taking people out to do that. I did the exact same thing when I was working in tech sales. Fortunately, I was in a startup, but I was in a space I've never worked in before, so employee benefits. So there's all these terms that have been thrown around, especially when it's insurance. And I remember just writing down everything. And it felt like you felt stupid because you didn't know. So the best thing for me to do was just take everything down, ask one of the co-founders whenever we had a one-to-one. I was like, what does this mean? What does this mean? Just literally drill them.
Yes.
And then it got to a point where after a year or so being there, other people that came that were quite new would start asking me questions like, what does this mean? What does that mean? And now I'm that person that's on the other side that's actually telling them these terms. So it's always that jargon that sometimes is that barrier for people to know more. And that's partly why even with these episodes, there's going to be words that will be terms that have been thrown around. And what we've done is we share what that definition is, so that when someone's watching it or they're engaging with our content, they're not just feeling like out of the loop in terms of what are these guys talking about, because it can easily go over your head.
Well, hereditament is particularly niche. So you can cut that bit out.
We're going to need that on the screen for someone.
Yeah, for real.
Do with rate.
I need it for myself.
Cool. So, okay, so we've kind of talked through your career into property. I think a key thing to point out as well, because Daniel Priestley talks about it, if you want to be an entrepreneur, go and work for a startup and just take in as much information as possible. And I think it's probably testament to what Andrew's done, to what you've done, is being able to be so early on in a company where you can literally see it grow, and you just, you're basically just a sponge soaking in so much information. But like I said, that has led you or helped you in terms of starting up your own company, Kinrise.
Yes.
So talk us through Kinrise. Who are Kinrise? What do Kinrise do?
So Kinrise is an investment company. So we're one of those buyers now, essentially, of the commercial properties. So what I didn't say about that journey, the 10 years working with those partners, is we went from being investment agents to being investment managers. So structuring funds or joint ventures to actually go and buy real estate and be the buyer. So there was this transition during that time, which was also a really helpful transition. So by the end of 2014, I'd done a decade with them. I had an amazing time, learned a load, but definitely the entrepreneurial, drive was coming. And I mean, that was evidenced by some of the side hustles I'd had while I was working. So
what were some of them?
So our office was on Savile Row, in the West End of London, which is known for tailoring. And so I was going to my office each day and I was walking past these incredible tailors, beautiful suits. And I was wearing a suit every day because that's what we did before COVID, and I've now restarted as well, although I'm not like one now.
Yeah.
And I went into a few of the tailors to say, okay, how much would it cost? And I'm 6'4", like
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And so buying off the shelf was tough. I can look pretty ridiculous and things off the shelf when it comes to suits. So I mean, obviously you can buy off the shelf and then have it like
Tailored,
creased
yeah.
and the arms taken down.
I'm
and
always
like
going to dry
everything
cleaners,
else.
changing things around. Yeah.
So I walked into these tailors and thought, okay, you know, how much would it cost to get a suit? And it was thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds. And they are beautiful. It's incredible what they do, but I could not afford that. And then I happened to have lunch with a friend who was a dressmaker. And I said to her, would your workshop that makes the dresses ever be able to make suits? And she said, I don't know. I'll call them and find out. It turns out they were making beautiful suits and trousers and jackets for very big brands, quietly in East London. And so we went along there, started a tailoring business. And so we basically cut out a lot of the costs by having a shop and all that type of thing. And we had a brilliant tailor who would go to your office or your home, measure you, show you the cloth. You'd choose your style, everything else. It would go to the workshop. They'd make it, come and do a fitting, and then send you a suit. And so I realized through that process that tailoring is more of an art than a business, that Savile Row should be protected as part of British heritage, because it's incredibly hard to make suits at good value, or at a low cost, I should say. So anyway, I had a tailoring business. We made about 100 suits a year. Loved it. Didn't make any money.
Were you involved in the day-to-day?
No.
Okay.
But it was enormous fun. I ended up with a wardrobe full of suits. So yeah, I learned a lot from that. That transitioned to helping start an eyewear business called Finlay, which we can come back to. Or
Yeah,
talk
definitely.
about. Should we
Are
come
you
back
wearing
to it?
Finlay glasses right now?
Yeah.
Yeah. I need a pair, man.
Yeah, yeah. You need a pair.
Yeah,
right?
no, honestly.
I mean, you can sponsor the pod if you want.
I'll wear the glasses all the time, honestly.
I suppose the point I was making there was there was definitely something entrepreneurial going on in me that saw me wanting to do things like tailor suits at the same time as investing in commercial property. But there was something very entrepreneurial about the journey in that property business as well. So end of 2014, I realized, okay, done a decade with that team, time to do it myself. So had definitely felt the entrepreneurial urge after 10 years working with that team to start out a new business, you know, something to lead myself. And so 2015 started Kinrise. And the vision for it was around the renewal of UK cities. So we could see that just from that 10 years of being in the market, the cities were growing a lot faster than the country was.
Gotcha.
Generally speaking, I think the country's growth is measured in GDP, gross domestic product.
Yeah.
And then locally, it's GVA, which I think is gross value added. So I think so. We could see that these cities were growing and growing fast, but they could also grow, you know, broadly in two different ways. They could regenerate well, or they could gentrify badly. And so we thought, okay, well, we could actually play our part in the growth of these cities, but doing it in a positive way, where you take existing buildings rather than building new buildings. And that's a whole debate we can come to afterwards. But take existing buildings, which in many cases are incredible buildings, many of which are a product of the Industrial Revolution. So you saw this extraordinary growth in the Industrial Revolution, and the way that many of the owners of industry then, or even just the premises that were housing that industry, displayed their business or their influence or their power or their wealth was in buildings. And that's why you have these incredible buildings all around Manchester where we are today, either because the building was being used to do something like that, or it was an insurance company or a tax office or whatever else
like
it
a
was.
wealthy family, right?
But it showed permanence. They were built amazingly and beautifully, and the names of the businesses were inscribed in the stone because they thought they were going to be there forever. And we don't do that anymore. We throw up fake brick towers or glass and steel offices for residential or for office. And So we thought, okay, there's a load of these amazing buildings that are sitting there. That city is growing fast. So there's going to be businesses that need space. And they typically don't go into those buildings because they're of low quality. But if we go and invest in those buildings and we upgrade them such that the internal specification is as good as the new building next door, then surely a business is going to choose, it's got all the air conditioning and the new lifts and the new lighting, and it's all energy compliant and everything else. And it's great and it's design led, but also it's in a shell that is characterful and beautiful, and it tells a story, the building. And so we could see that was coming. And it was quite early days, I would say, in it. So when we started 2015, the first thing we did was come up to Manchester and bought a portfolio of buildings off one of our investors. And it was a perfect example where there was still, the city was full of buildings that were empty upstairs. They may have had shops on the ground floor or restaurants, but they were empty upstairs because they hadn't had the work done on upgrading them. And so we could see that across the UK there was a big opportunity there, and that has evolved over time, over the last 10 years, that strategy. But it still stands true that we believe there's companies that want to hire the great people that are coming out of universities in UK cities, and they don't necessarily want to go into the new building, or the new building doesn't exist.
True.
Because there's such a shortage of high quality office space. But actually, if there's an old building, a historic building, an iconic building, a characterful building, they would actually choose that one if you get the internal specification right.
So, key thing for me, well, I guess when we first met, so obviously Tim put us in touch.
Yes.
And Tim just said, I know this guy in property, really good guy, you should connect. And I think the intro email, the next email back was you saying, I'm going up to Manchester on this day. I've booked your ticket. Meet me at Euston. First of all, that stood out to me because I was just like, I've never met this guy, but yeah, he's inviting me on a trip up to Manchester.
And you didn't at that point, you didn't typically go out of London, right?
Yeah, not really. Yeah, I hadn't been to Manchester at all. But I remember us getting on that train, 2.5 hour trip.
Yeah.
I learned a lot about you and you learned a lot about me, but it's interesting because although we were there for property, that whole trip up, I feel like you really wanted to know more about my story, my journey, and Hackney. Yeah. Because I found out you live in Hackney.
Yeah.
And I was surprised at that. I was like, how on earth do you live round the corner from me?
Yeah.
But you were kind of interested in the culture around Hackney. But one thing I did take away as well from that trip was the thing that you just mentioned in terms of the renewal of older buildings.
Yes.
Because at that time, I think I was very much fixated on new build.
Yeah.
Like I thought new build was the best thing ever. And until I came up to Manchester with you that day and I saw the buildings that you showed me. But it was an interesting meeting again because I kind of saw the scale of which, you were acquiring these buildings. And there was a lot to take away for me, but...
Do you remember the deal that we did?
The Leeds one?
No, the deal that you and I did on that train journey.
Where you tried to get him to...
So from memory, the deal was from London to Manchester for 2 and a bit hours. You could ask me about property.
Oh yeah.
And from Manchester to London for 2 and a bit
you could
hours,
ask me
I
about...
could ask you about prisons.
yeah. That was interesting. It was good though. It was good in terms of...
Yeah, it was very powerful for me because, I think at that time, so that was 2019.
It was.
And we'd done a project with the Clink charity.
I remember
helping, which is an amazing charity, training people on day release or in prison around catering and hospitality. But actually, it was the first time I'd had the chance to sit down with someone on a train, so they couldn't move, and they owed me something because I'd spent 2 and a bit hours talking about property. But just to ask the reality of how did you go? Because I know what a good person you are.
Thank you.
I've known that from the beginning. But how does, from where you grew up, an area that I love, how did that happen? How did you get there? You taught me a lot about how the slippery slope to ending up there. And then the challenges of coming out. What do you do with it? How do you go from there?
Yeah.
And you've built a business
off
off the back of it, which is incredible. So it was very, very valuable to me that day.
Likewise. I think for me, it was just seeing the scale. Because again, like, you know, coming from where we come from, you don't meet many people like yourself. Just in terms of like, you know, I'm buying. I think that meeting as well, you know, you were talking about buying a £60 million building in Leeds. And I remember just like racking my brain thinking, am I sitting with a guy that's got 60 million in his bank account? Like, and for me, that was my actual logical thinking.
Yeah.
So I remember I asked you about funding, and then you're talking about funding partners and so on
Yeah.
and so forth. And then it kind of broke down the game a little bit more.
That's a really important point. So investment managers, in fact, many investment companies or investors out there, they'll have their own money invested alongside, and that's really important. So you're well aligned.
Yeah.
But on the whole, the money they are investing is not their own. So we've invested about £280 million in 14 buildings across 6 different cities. And I have money invested in there as well, but that is not all my money, you know, by a very, very long way. A tiny amount of that. And same with a hedge fund. A hedge fund, you know, you have these rock star hedge fund managers who now have made a huge amount of money themselves, but they were investing investors' money.
Yeah.
And so investment management is money management. You're obviously taking on investors' money into some sort of structure, and then you're going and investing it and hopefully investing it well.
Yeah.
And you charge fees typically to the investors for managing their money well, and then profit shares and everything else. But yeah, that is a very common misconception. You know, I've not got 280 million.
Yeah.
I've never had that 280 million, but we've had the honor of stewarding investment money in different structures in different ways, or advising the structures that invest the money. So I think often investors actually kind of throw their weight around as if it was all their money.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
Everyone's got a client.
Yeah.
You know, a pension fund, typically the biggest investors out there. It's our pensions that is aggregated into the pension fund that's being invested in the big building and spinning fields.
Yeah.
It's not theirs.
I find it very interesting because obviously you talk about that journey up, and I remember speaking to Ross shortly after he connected with you, and he first told me about Tim, then he told me about you, and I thought the same thing when he told me about the value of the buildings that you were involved in. I was just like, who is this guy? We need to meet. And I remember the first time when I met you, I'm not sure if you remember, but we came around near your office and you spoke a lot about like faith that day. But I remember where I was in that stage of my life, I did not care. I just said, listen, you've dealt with some serious buildings, and more specifically, the Hackney Church. I remember when you talked, like, that was brought to my attention that you were part of the redevelopment of that building, and that was my school church. So I can still remember it in my head. Even when I go to it now, I can still remember exactly how it looked like previously to the redevelopment. And that for me was like, I need to know who you are, because
100%.
that church is a church that most people in Hackney, especially from where we grew up, they know it. And it being my school church as well, it was like, okay, I want to know a lot more about what it is that you do. So even though you were speaking to us about like trying to understand our upbringing and, you know, our friends, and, you know, I kind of had even though me and Ross and I had a similar upbringing, our outcomes are slightly different, but we're still aligned in terms of where we are today. And I think you were curious to understand, okay, how come you didn't go down that road, right? Like, why was it a case that you probably stayed in the straight and the narrow? And there was obviously various reasons as to why, but I was just curious to understand, how did you get involved in this? So, I mean, speaking about some of the commercial projects, even the Hackney Church, how did that come about in terms of, you know, redeveloping that?
So I was living in South London with my wife, and a great friend of ours was a vicar, so a priest or vicar, and he was then appointed the rector of Hackney, which is like the kind of area vicar of Hackney, and so for the whole borough, and we'd made a commitment to him, because in his previous church he'd been there a long time. It was time for him to take on his own church, basically, and we'd made a commitment to him to move wherever he was going to move to become a vicar or a priest.
Interesting.
Turns out it was to be the rector of Hackney. And so, 9 years ago, I think it was, we moved to Hackney Central.
Were you keen on the move?
I'd never stepped foot in Hackney Central before. I love South London. But we happily moved, and it was a complete adventure. And I'll never regret it. It's been amazing. But it was a whole new city for me. So, the borough of Hackney is like 800,000 people, I think. It's the same size as Bristol or Leeds.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
So it's a whole new city, and obviously lots of sub areas within that are very different, like Shoreditch and the Beauvoir and like Dalston. Very different types of areas.
Stoke Newington, Stamford Hill.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And fascinating area. I loved it. I've like an inquiring mind, I suppose. I'm like very inquisitive, enjoy something new. I don't mind change at all. Change doesn't scare me. And so we just upped and left, sold our place in South London, moved to East London.
There's a funny thing that you said to me on the train, and when we were talking about Hackney, right? We were talking about, the area, the culture, and you moved to actually one of the toughest parts of Hackney. But I remember you saying to me, there's, look at my window and there's guys meeting each other, exchanging things, and then 10, 15 minutes later they're doing it again. And
I was like, and I said it at the time, you're an entrepreneur. You're and it's obvious that a lot of people who fall into that it's a product of unfortunate circumstances and what you're born into or placed into, which is incredibly tough. But you're an entrepreneur, you're enterprising, and it just came out in the wrong way.
Yeah.
And so I learned a lot about what was going on in the streets around us, like how the dealing was working, and how sad that is. From such a young age, people getting involved.
Yeah, for sure. About
county lines before people were talking about county lines. It was fascinating to me. But then, the area of Hackney we're all, you're from and I'm in, live in, is you've got like £4 cappuccinos and drug dealing. And, we talked about the murder of someone that you were at school with from the same school. And there's like these different worlds are 100%. Living side by side in a very unusual way. And this was really crucial in terms of the rector of Hackney's approach, because he was taking on what is the largest capacity church in the Church of England. It was a building that was built in the 1750s to house 2,000 people, my memory. Wow. And it had an amazing, small but amazing congregation in there that were faithful, that were there. But it was I would guess 50 people on a Sunday, and it was beautifully diverse, like old and young, black and white, like every that like by race, by affluence, by all sorts of things. It was incredibly diverse, the congregation, and the rector committed to making sure it stayed that way, which is not normal. You have majority black churches in Hackney, lots of them, where you probably won't see many white faces, and vice versa. And this was a very, very special thing that he did. He said, okay, I'm going to get to know this congregation well and keep what is great about it as we grow and as we refurbish the building, and we do all these different, economic ventures to try and help make it sustainable, like the events, the gigs and events business, and the housing development next door, and all these sort of innovations, but not to lose that beautiful diversity that is still there today.
For sure.
And if you go there now, like the joint prayer meeting that was there on Monday, there was probably 1,500 people. Yeah,
there was a lot of people there
in that place, praying, singing, and it would have been very, very diverse, I imagine.
Yeah, I remember my friend actually told me about the event, the joint prayer gathering at the start of the year. And I just remember going to visit, and I was like, this is actually amazing, because it feels like, one, I'm in an environment that I'm used to being in, but outside, but not necessarily in the church, because there's so many different faces, different backgrounds, like you said, black, white, Asian, literally all cultures in one room, for one particular purpose. And I was like, this is happening in my childhood church, in my childhood area, which was special. And then that's funny, because earlier in the year, I hadn't seen you probably since that time we had met. And then I bumped into you. But that morning as well, actually, funny enough, is when I asked for your number from Ross.
Yeah.
Really?
And then that evening I saw you. So I was like, mate, there's no way that was a coincidence. Like there was a particular reason why I saw you that day. I know obviously from a faith side, that's a really important part for you in terms of, you know, how you go about day to day. How does that actually tie into Kinrise? Because I know in some way Kinrise is derived from that in terms of your faith. So like talk to us a little bit about that. Like how are you bridging the gap between your faith and your business into one?
I think I see them as like inseparable. I see my faith and my life and my work and all of it, family, is inseparable. So I find it hard to understand some people's separation between like their work life or how they behave at work, and then if they have a faith, how they behave, you know, in that context. So it's maybe, you know, because Dad was, you know, leading worship, and I was in a way a bit like a pastor's kid. So it was like extremely normal to me growing up being in church. But I found a faith of my own, and that frames everything I do. It frames my entire life. So, you know, my primary calling is to love God and to serve the Lord. And then what flows from that is to love and serve people in whatever way that might flow out. Yeah. And I don't do it well often, but actually the business is really just, you know, an extension of, you know, my life in the same way as the rest of my life is. And that's the real privilege of being able to lead a business. It's a lot harder if you're, you know, working for someone else in a very tightly structured department of a very large business. You know, that has a whole different set of challenges. But actually, you know, when you get to set the direction of a business with my co-founder, George, who shares faith as well, then it's a real privilege for that to like flow through into the business. Yeah. And so Kinrise is designed to be a great business, we hope, and to make great returns. And the mission of the business is to create buildings that abundantly benefit the investors, unashamedly, because they're risking huge amounts of capital, enormous amounts, you know, with our own money in there as well, in the buildings. Yeah. So to abundantly benefit the investors, but also abundantly benefit the tenants in the way that we design, set out, program the space. Yeah. And abundantly benefit the neighborhood. And so you can share my faith or not share my faith. That's absolutely fine. And the same within our team. You can share our faith or not share it. Absolutely fine. But hopefully you buy into the mission of abundantly benefiting the owners, the tenants, and the neighborhood. And that's the kind of fine balance that we're trying to find. Yeah. And we know from our experience of the last 10 years that actually if you think a lot about all three, not just about the shareholders or investors, that you actually, they're all mutually reinforcing. So really thinking about the benefit to the neighborhood has positive benefits as well for, let's say, people knowing about the building, liking the idea of the building. That might lead to companies saying, I'd like to be a tenant in that building. Or really thinking about the tenants, how we design, set out and program the space, connecting them with the neighborhood. So such that they see, oh, this neighborhood actually has some needs, and they're needs that could be met by me, whether it's through my business or me at the weekend, whether it's helping with a website, accounting, giving some money, giving time, whatever it is. So these are mutually reinforcing, and that actually drives our returns. It does not detract from our returns.
I really like that perspective actually, because it's very similar to how Ross and I view business, especially when it comes to tenants as well. You're seeing them as a customer as opposed to like this is a tenant that you just throw in there and you know they figure it out. You're actually catering to them, which I think that's probably what gives property maybe historically a bad rep, because that's how property used to be, especially in a residential space and to some degree in a commercial space as well, where you know you put the tenant in there and they'll figure it out and just make sure you pay your rent. But ultimately they're paying you, and just like any normal business, if a customer is paying you, to attract them in the first place, you need to understand what your customers' needs are, what's going to benefit them, how are you going to add value, and you're applying that in the same way, because there's various parties that are involved in the investment agency where you're, well, not agency, but the management firm where you're serving the investors, but you're also serving the tenants because they're going to be users of these spaces as well. And that's obviously going to be the byproduct of that is that's going to also benefit the investors as well. Yes. So I really like that approach.
And I'm sure you have a community-led approach to how you're dealing with residents and who are your customers. Yeah. And I bet your retention levels, your retention time is higher than your competitors.
Correct. Yeah.
Because you're thinking about them in that way.
Yeah.
And if you see tenants, whether they're a single resident in one of your buildings or a global company in one of our buildings, if you're treating them just like an income stream on a spreadsheet,
They'll go. Yeah.
there'll be little loyalty at the end of that lease,
Precisely.
or you're not listening to their requests or their concerns or whatever it is along the way. You're very unlikely to keep them.
But yeah, I wanted to tap into your relationship with George because Ross and I were co-founders as well. We're childhood friends, so it's slightly different in terms of even how we've been able to complement each other in terms of our skills. We've had this conversation privately in terms of like, what is it that you bring to the table in terms of the partnership, and what is it that he's really good at in terms of, you know, the business setup as a whole? You know, maybe even talk a little bit about that. Like, what are some of your strengths when it comes to, you know, a co-founder setup?
Yeah, it's a great question. So George and I, it was lucky, we were friends before we worked together, because we worked together then in that previous business, and then running a business together.
No.
So there's a very sort of, I suppose, grounded like friendship there, but it's quite high risk working with friends or family. And you know, we've had, I think we've worked together for, I would guess, nearly probably 13, 14 years, known each other longer than that. And from my perspective anyway, it's worked really well. You know, we work really well together. And partly because we do have different lanes, although the lanes overlap, and I think we overlap well when we do overlap.
Yeah.
And so we in the early days, like you'll know from, you know, when you're setting up the business, like there's a very long list of things that have to get done. And there isn't like a neat team, like
not at all.
CFO, CEO, COO, all of that. You just have to get it all done.
Yeah.
And so we separated, I think, pretty well into sort of two lanes at that point, which was, you know, very broadly speaking, I feel more comfortable probably thinking about sort of what's over the hill, you know, in terms of like vision, or, you know, and that can lead to some quite weird conversations like what we think's coming, or, you know, and I think when it works, it leads to things like, you know, we bought one of the first co-working spaces to Manchester at a time, you know, when, I mean, now you trip over a co-working space on every corner. But, you know, because we were like, oh, there's this thing, it's, you know, working in other cities and we should bring it here. And other times it gets really weird, what's over the hill. But I feel very comfortable in that space of thinking, okay, what's coming down the line in the market or the economy or people's behavior and all that sort of stuff. George is very clear-minded in terms of how to get there. So I think we were certainly in the early years, I might say, I think this is where we're going over the hill.
Yeah.
We can't really see it yet, but it looks something like this, that, and the other. And he would say, okay, this is how we're going to get there.
Yeah.
And that was really glorious. Now, things have changed over time and we've got an amazing team. So we have, you know, brilliant people doing compliance, operations, marketing, community management, asset management, property management, all, you know, all these different things, which has really enabled George and I to think a lot about the market and how buildings should be set up, you know, the mission, how we operate, innovation, all those types of things. And actually we are both, I think, creative and we love people. And those two things play well in property. Yeah. You know, because you're ultimately housing people where they're living there or working there. And we've managed to then build in some really good structure around, as I said, the other more operational things or things that we're not good at. And so I think, you know, I heard it from several people early on and probably in books or podcasts or leadership courses or whatever else. Yeah. Just about knowing who you are, being honest about what you're good at and not good at, and just owning that and then saying, we need someone who's going to be good at this thing. Yeah. And it's not weakness. You know, we're all designed differently. And we have strengths and weaknesses, and we need to just be open and honest with each other as founders about that. And so George and I are very open and honest with each other about that and about what we collectively are not good at and where we need to fill those gaps. And that's why we built the team that we have. Yeah. And
just
so
laughing at it because we had that recent conversation ourselves. So and
that's painful work. Yeah. You know, we've found some brilliant tools for it. So, you know, well known obviously is Myers-Briggs, you know, assessments, which, we've done and all the team does, you can then actually translate Myers-Briggs into something called 5 Voices,
Okay.
which I would really recommend you check out, because I always forget what I am in Myers-Briggs, EN
Yeah.
something J.
Mine changes as
I
well.
can't remember, because that's not the way my brain works
Yeah.
to remember that code.
Yeah.
But in 5 Voices, it's essentially down into, it summarizes it into known words, which, as you heard earlier, is something I like. I like demystifying. And the 2 that I am is creative and connector. And the other one will be very operational, and another one will be very pastoral, and the like. I can't remember what the names are, but
Yeah.
and actually, funny enough, George is the same. He's also creative and connector. And so we've realized that startup years, you just got to get everything done, and you do
100%.
it to the best of your ability.
Yep.
But actually now we can really think about, okay, if we're both that, where are the gaps going to be, and we can hire around those gaps, or hire in consultancy around those gaps.
That's kind of like a similar approach we've applied, especially this year. I think we've become more honest with what we're good at. And it's probably on the back of Dubai as well, because Ross and I both have a background in sales. I know I've done sales more in the tech area and maybe more complex sales in that regard. But Ross, for me, I've always seen as like a natural networker. I can network as well. Like sometimes I meet people. I was at a networking event yesterday and the guy was like, "You're not an introvert." And I was like, "I am an introvert. I'm telling you, this isn't something I would naturally go towards, but I can do it because I'm so used to being, or I'm so comfortable being uncomfortable."
Yes.
And I know that's where growth lies.
Yeah.
So going back to like our skill set, we know where our strengths are. But more recently, like we've taken on recently hired a fractional CFO, because I was primarily responsible for the finances part. And I used to be good at maths, but I'm no CFO. And I realized like I can either try and get really good at this thing, but then I'm going to end up neglecting everything else, or just get an expert in that can focus on that part of the business.
Brilliant.
And that helps us to focus on the areas that we are really good at. And then we also know operations is an area that, I'm okay with it because I've got like a operational mind to some degree. I won't say, would you say you're an operational guy? He's not at all. I wanted to be kind, but he's not an operational guy.
Nah.
But we've seen that, these are some of the gaps here. So we know we need to get an operational person in to run the business, right? And deal with that part. But it's just, as you said, being completely honest with yourself, which sometimes is hard for us to do. We like to lie to ourselves. We don't like to tell ourselves we're not good at a particular thing unless we absolutely know we're not good at that. But you like to think you're good at this until maybe you're put against someone that is genuinely good at that particular area. So I really like the fact that you've been honest in your partnership. We call it trespass. We've been very clear on having that moment to just be brutally honest with each other and not take offense.
Yes.
So not trying to filter how I'm going to say something. I'm going to say, "Ross, like, fix up," rather than thinking like, how am I going to communicate this message to Ross? It's just being blunt and
if you're in
helps.
different lanes, you actually have a different perspective on the thing in the other person's lane.
Correct.
So you'll be less emotionally attached to it or less scared of it, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You'll just see it for what it is. And so if you can do that in trust and just share, okay, this area that you take care of, it feels like this, that, and the other is falling down a bit, and vice versa. And that needs to be built on trust, but is extremely helpful.
Definitely.
Because we get into the weeds in our own area and we can't see it.
I've got one question, and kind of slightly moving away from the property side. Finlay, we mentioned it earlier.
Yes.
Finlay & Co. How did that? You mentioned how it came about in terms of the eyewear brand. I'm obviously very keen to learn them. Like I like the design part. I've got a very creative mind. So talk to us about that business as well. Like what's kind of your role in that? How did that get started?
So that was, so I was doing the tailoring.
Yeah.
A friend from church came along and said, "I'm thinking of starting an eyewear business," and showed me the sample of what he was thinking of.
Yeah.
And I thought, that is beautiful. And actually I can see that where tailoring is, very, very, very difficult business to scale, because literally it's tailored to each person.
Yeah.
It's unscalable. But actually this is something that could really scale, and it was a beautiful product. And so I just jumped in with him to help him set it up. And again, from an advisory point of view, I've never been in it, the day-to-day of it, but it was with him and 2 other friends, so there were 4 of us setting it up. None of us had any experience in eyewear. And if you look at like the world of optical, so opticians, it's highly technical,
Very.
very medical.
Yeah.
You know, there's huge barriers to entry there, and we had no experience in that area. But we knew we had a cool product, and we showed it to a few people. And I'd previously made a suit. Mary and I, the co-founder on the suits, had made a suit for David Gandy, and then gave him a pair of the glasses, and he just wore them, you know, got photographed wearing them,
Yeah.
and seemed to enjoy them. And then we had magazines calling saying, "Oh, we've seen David wearing these. You know, where can we buy them?" And our website wasn't even up yet.
Wow.
And so we, you know, he was incredibly kind. He's an amazing supporter of British businesses, and a great entrepreneur as well. And he just would wear them all the time, and really got behind them. And we've had a collaboration with Noel Gallagher this summer.
Yeah, I saw that as well.
Which was the summer to have it.
Yeah.
In aid of Teenage Cancer Trust, and so we've over the 10 years or more actually that we've had Finlay, that business has really grown off the back of great partnerships. So collaborating with all sorts of different businesses.
Yeah.
But ultimately it comes back to, it's a very high quality product. So we could see at the time that eyewear everyone was either wearing Ray-Bans. Basically, everyone was wearing Ray-Bans because no one could afford like £500 or £600 designer frames. And so we thought, okay, there needs to be more choice here, more independent eyewear companies. So we set one up, and lots of others grew up at that time as well. But yeah, making a very high quality in the same acetate that the £500 or £600 frames are made out of. So the highest quality acetate, highest quality lenses, but just not charging that same markup.
Yeah.
So good value. And we have incredible opticians in our Notting Hill and Soho stores.
I had a friend that was an optometrist. She used to work at Finlay & Co.
Right.
And I was like, I actually know the co-founder of this. She's like, no way, that's really cool.
And people with complex eye care needs text me and say, I went and had an eye test and it was better than any I've had anywhere else.
That's amazing.
So it's a very high quality eye test and covers eye health as well as, because you can pick up early some health conditions through eye tests. And anyway, so it's a great business. As I said, I can't take any credit for it. I don't do any of the day to day, but it's been enormous fun and taking us to some fun places around the world as well.
Look, I'm happy to be photographed in them as well. So get picked up by the press and say, hey, yeah, look, Finlay & Co.
How many stores? How many?
Is it 2, right?
2 stores.
2 stores, and then online as well.
Soho, Notting Hill, online, and then wholesale in various retailers.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember seeing it and I'm just thinking, what does Sam like run the day to day of Finlay and then also do Kinrise?
But I think that's a really cool thing because for me, I always said like property isn't going to be the only type of business I'm going to be in. I know we've got the property podcast, we've got the property business that we're doing on the management side, portfolio building as well. But I'm very creative. There's other things I want to spend my time on as well. But I know I'm not going to also be the operator of those businesses. So it's about maybe partnering up with the right people that are going to run the day to day, but you come in as an advisory role, whatever sort of value you bring to the table, you're still part of that. You're just playing your role and you're a part of that business. Because I definitely know that's a space I want to pursue. But I like the way that you had to. You almost had, I didn't think you knew that in the beginning because you was trying to be in the day to day. I remember you mentioned this, and then you realized that actually I can't do this.
So early days when I had those things going on, they are time consuming. And so I very quickly realized that this is high pressure to be doing a day's work and then all evening working on something.
Yeah.
And I had the pleasure of meeting Charles Dunston, who started Car Phone Warehouse, and amazing entrepreneur. And he said, I went and asked him for advice, and he said, you can't be involved in all these different things. You've got to pick your focus.
Yeah.
And off the back of that meeting, I was like, no, my focus is the day job, which is the property. And because you can't, unless you're Elon Musk, you can't run multiple things at the same time.
Yeah.
And so I picked the day job, the main thing, completely focused on that, and I support and help where I can, whether it's on the board at those businesses or as a trustee of church or charity.
Cool. So, I mean, obviously, quite an extensive career in business and entrepreneurship. What would you say to younger Sam, just starting out, fully fresh, but also knowing what you know now? What kind of, pieces of advice would you hold to be true that you would give to your younger self?
I would say there's a book called Who Moved the Cheese?
Yeah, I've read that.
Which is amazing.
Yeah.
It's quick. I'm not a very good reader, and it's a quick read.
Yeah.
And it's essentially saying you might be on, running something or doing something, and then you hit a bit of a wall. And I'm going to get this all wrong in terms of, I haven't read it for a long time, but it was essentially you have to know when that game is up, when you need to pivot. Because you can keep scratching away for the cheese in the corner of the room where there is no cheese, hoping that there's still going to be some cheese there. But actually, the cheese has moved. And so you have to recognize that. And it's really painful to recognize that in many cases. So so rather than then just scratching away at the wrong thing for another 5 or 10 years, sometimes you've got to pivot. And I think with the kind of rise of startups, especially technology startups, they sort of normalize the idea of pivoting, which is great. So actually, loads of the big companies we know now started out as something completely different.
Yeah.
And that's good. And you don't want to pivot so much that people are just dizzy trying to follow what your company does or is. But actually trying things, working out, being honest with yourself about whether that product or service is a thing, whether people want it, and if they don't, moving. And that's kind of business development, which is what I love most. And that's most in my sweet spot. Is, our buildings today, very different to our buildings 5 years ago and 10 years ago. The layouts are different, the design is different, the focus on certain types of space is completely different.
Yeah.
And so, we're developing or refurbishing a huge building in Bristol called Cannon's Wharf. And when that launches and people move in 2027, that interior, the layout, the technology, the way that we program it is going to be completely different to the buildings we have now and the buildings we had 5 years ago.
What has been your thoughts on the planning process? Because I'm sure you've been through the planning process a few times.
Yes.
What's your thoughts on it?
Well, I'm really thankful for strict listed building consent and strict planning permission. And it's why our cities are so amazing still. So our cities, the heritage of our cities and iconic buildings, whether they're old or new, there's some recently listed, iconic buildings. I think that's a very good thing. It's what's kept our cities interesting, because you go to cities around the world where they just demolished all their heritage in the hope that it was going to be all new and this was the future. And it was just complete waste. Yeah. It was environmental waste. It's a heritage waste. It negatively impacts community, all sorts of reasons. So I'm very grateful for strict planning, strict planning regime and strict listed building regime. But the way it's currently administered and run is appalling because there's not enough people in there. Yeah. There's not enough case officers or planning officers. Okay. And they haven't embraced technology quickly enough. And so what should take, 8 weeks or 12 weeks is taking 8, 12, 18 months. And that's appalling. And there's no wonder there's a housing shortage. Of course. And there is now a shortage of high quality office space, which is the very space where businesses, if we want growth, they have to be somewhere. It has to be high quality and serve their needs. Yeah. And there's not enough good office space or good housing. There's plenty of bad housing and plenty of bad office space. But for the new stuff to come through, it has to be eased, that planning process. It has to be sped up. It's incredibly painful. Within planning, there's lots of different departments that are working against each other because they have competing interests, essentially. Yeah. Whether it's heritage versus environmental or, local economy versus highways, and so it must take, very good planning officers to be able to juggle all those competing interests and come to the right outcome. Yeah. and they do. We've never been turned down for any planning or listed building consent.
Oh.
But the time it's taken has meant that the economic activity coming from that building is 12 to 24 months later than it should be. And that impacts the whole investment and impacts the number of buildings we can turn around and refurbish and renew.
Yeah.
So I would not throw planning out the window, but I would radically reform how it's run.
It's probably both the same on both the commercial as well as residential side of things.
Yeah, for sure. Probably just a few closing questions from me. So, Kinrise is 10 years old.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
What's the plan moving forward?
That's a great question. So our mission stays the same. Our vision of the renewal of UK cities still stands. Our mission of creating buildings that abundantly benefit the owner, the tenant, and the neighbourhood still stands and has developed a lot over time. And we want to scale that further. So there's still plenty of really unique buildings across cities of the UK that are sitting empty at the same time as there's companies that need good space.
Yeah.
And so there's plenty more to do. So there's a very, our kind of core strategy of buying, upgrading, leasing, and then activating iconic buildings still stands and is our main focus. And then we're always keeping our eye on other sectors. So just keeping an eye on, okay, could we apply this method, philosophy, approach to other sectors? And, we've done that. We've always kept that in our minds over the last 10 years, exploring weird and wonderful ideas.
Yeah.
So far, we haven't done it, but there's so much opportunity out there.
Yeah.
And there's so little capital in them. So liquidity, there's not many investors from around the world are saying the UK looks like a really good idea at the moment because of the bad press, because of all sorts of reasons. But actually the underlying market is exceptionally attractive because you have low supply and high demand, which as you and all your viewers and listeners will be like, oh, hang on, high demand for office, is that really true? Yes, there's an incredible shortage of high quality offices. There's loads of companies that are saying working from home is destroying our company culture, innovation, collaboration, all of that. Let's bring them together. Okay, if we're going to bring them together, it's got to be in a good space that's worth the commute. Where is that space? Is it good? And there's just nothing out there.
Yeah.
So little supply. And that's why you've seen 7% rental growth in offices over the last year across key UK cities, and as high as 18% rental growth in the last year in Bristol, because people are competing over very few buildings.
And you need to definitely take that into consideration when you're thinking of an office space to foster collaboration, right? You don't want to just dump someone into a space just because it's an office and it ticks a box. It's not a tick box exercise. It's definitely things that you do want to take into consideration. So yeah.
You coming into residential anytime soon?
It's not obvious to do that because it's very outside of our expertise.
Yeah.
So we've created university space, like business school space, but that's pretty adjacent to offices. We've never done anything with beds and bathrooms.
Yeah.
You guys are the experts at that. And actually, if we did go into other strategies, it would most likely be with partners.
Yeah.
With operating partners essentially who are experts in that area.
I'm very much a big believer of that approach. Like I really like it. It's ever since I've adopted that philosophy and that belief, it's opened the doors for what's potentially possible, right? So yeah, I do like that approach. Final question for me, which is probably a big one, but we didn't touch on it earlier, but we kind of scooted around it, was the existing buildings versus new builds.
Yes.
I know what your stance is on it, but for the viewers and the listeners,
yes,
what's your thoughts on existing versus new builds?
The short answer is that there's plenty of good buildings that already exist. So as I said earlier, there's a lot of buildings across UK cities that are sitting empty.
Yeah.
And I don't buy it has to be new to be environmental. I think it's the exact opposite. So knocking down a building and then binning it is not the environmental answer, regardless of how efficient the kit that you put in it to do heating and cooling is from that point onwards. So there's been this big sleight of hand in a way, with the industry about the greenest building is this new building with all the right certifications. It's not true. The greenest building is the building that already exists.
Yeah.
And most buildings that already exist, as long as they have sufficient floor to ceiling height and they're structurally sound, can be refurbished. So you can take it off gas and put it on all electric, so move it to air conditioning. You can fully refurbish it with great design. You can change the windows if they have bad windows. So if the shell is good, then you already have a bunch of commodities, like expensive commodities, whether it's steel, concrete, timber, whatever it is, sitting there.
Yeah.
So binning it and starting again is not the right answer. Now, I'm not anti new development entirely, as long as architecturally it's interesting and it brings a lot more massing to that site than the previous one. So there'll be cases in a city centre where we're desperate for homes or we're desperate for new commercial space, and there's a very low rise, uninteresting building that could be replaced by a taller building with a lot of housing or a lot of offices. So in that case, that's a good idea, as long as it's not generic, what's built. The problem is with cost pressures, it probably will end up being generic. And I think we'll be looking back at some of the fake brick towers,
What have we built?
and go, what were we thinking with all of those?
Definitely.
One of them might have been cool, but to have a whole city full of them is not. So from an environmental point of view, it's absolutely the wrong thing to be doing. And as the grid decarbonizes, we put air conditioning into our refurbished, fully upgraded building at the same specification as a new building. And as the grid decarbonizes, both those buildings use less and less, emit less and less over time from the grid. And so, typically speaking, our buildings versus new buildings, the new building will take between 50 and 100 years to make up for the fact that it's new versus our building. And the internal space is the same specification. And we would argue that our building is far more interesting, characterful, tells a story and everything else.
Yeah.
So then community-wise, I think it's very alienating for an existing community to see a building they've always known dropped and then something new go up, which is typically got, closed, locked doors, security guards, everything else.
Yeah.
Whereas if you take an existing building that they've always known, hopefully it's architecturally interesting, and you bring it back to life, that is far more accretive to the local community.
I agree.
So there's financial reasons. Like I said, you're binning a load of expensive commodities, raw materials. If you don't do that and you upgrade the thing that's already there, as long as you've managed to buy it at the right price, then you're going to be turning it round for a far lower cost than building a new building. Your planning is going to be quicker because you're refurbishing, you're not knocking down a new build. And your build is going to be so much quicker as well.
No.
So, as you can tell, we're quite committed to it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't rule, we wouldn't rule out new build in the future in the right circumstances.
I mean, there's a lot of points you even mentioned there, like growing up where I've grown up, there's some buildings that are coming down and I'm looking at this and I'm saying, I'm never going to see this building again. Like knowing it's about to be knocked down, I was like, that is something that there's a lot of memories that happen there that is going to be gone, right? Yeah. And, you'll never see it again, only probably via pictures. So yeah, it's good to get that take. Conscious of time as well. So do you have any final questions? Any?
No, I think you've shared
Yeah.
so much already. I think, thank you for coming on. I think one last question would probably be, what's your favorite building out of all the buildings? What is your favorite building? Because I remember you taking me around to Manchester and showing me some of them, and I'm just like, I'm a sucker for architecture too. So when I saw some of them, I was like, this is amazing, and I do definitely respect the kind of heritage aspect. So what's your favorite?
So we've got a building called 81 Colmore Row in Birmingham, which is, the facade of that is absolutely exquisite. So have a look at that one. That's probably the favorite facade. It's actually got a new build. Well, it was I think rebuilt in the 80s behind. So there's a lot of modern space behind, which is in a way the best of both worlds. So for the facade, 81 Colmore Row, and then for the project, Cannon's Wharf in Bristol, because it's a 200,000 square foot building that was Lloyds Bank's headquarters on the harbour side. It's an area that's got an amazing history, fascinating history. It went from being, the canon of the cathedral's hay meadows and marshland to being docks, and so working docks, and then rebuilt for this headquarters in around 1989. Really iconic building. It's listed, even though it's built in 1989, 1990, because it's an extraordinary postmodern building. But the reason I'm so into it is because you've got a massive amphitheatre in front, which is the place where all the big, events, gigs, festivals happen. So it's very engaged with the city. And there's massive opportunity to turn it round. It was built as a bank, so it's very like cold, keep out. We're turning that round, putting in restaurants into the ground floor, coffee shop, an auditorium space that could host 200 people at an event built into the heart of this building. So, convening is a very important part of our model, where you've got global companies taking 10-year leases on whole floors. That's great. You've also got entrepreneurs in the managed workspace within the building. And then you've got people coming from the outside for events, and it's engaging with local organizations, charities and everything else. So I feel like that building is the best example yet of where our building could have a positive effect on the neighborhood because of its size, its position, and because of what we're building into it.
Amazing, man. Yeah, sounds great. Can't wait to see it when it's finished. We'll take a trip down.
Definitely.
But yeah, thanks again, Sam, for coming down.
Yeah.
Much appreciated. And yeah.
Thank you for having me.
No, definitely. As Ross said, we know we're really busy, so taking some time out to speak with us has been really good. I think we definitely go to you for a lot of advice as well when we can get you anyway.
It's always a pleasure.
But the fact we've had this is definitely one to remember. So thanks.
Right. Keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Cool.
Yeah, that's a wrap.
Yeah, man. That was good.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.